You know that feeling when you're scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and suddenly you realize you haven't talked to half the people in your contacts for months, maybe years. And it's not because you're busy. It's not because you forgot. It's because something inside you just stopped caring. You look at their names, you remember the conversations, the laughs, the moments you shared, and you feel nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even nostalgia. Just this vast, endless nothing. And the worst part? You don't even feel guilty about it. There's this voice in your head saying you should reach out. You should care, you should feel something, but you don't. You just close the phone and go back to staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly you became this person who can walk away from everyone without looking back. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever wondered why you can disconnect so easily while everyone around you seems to cling to relationships like their life depends on it, then stay here because today I'm going to show you the raw, uncomfortable truth about human nature that explains why some people can walk away from anyone, and why that might not be the problem you think it is. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. How many relationships in your life right now are you maintaining out of genuine desire versus obligation? How many people do you talk to because you actually want to, versus because you feel like you should? Think about that for a second. Really think about it. Because here's what human nature teaches us, and this goes back thousands of years, back to when we were living in small tribes and your survival literally depended on your social connections. Back then, walking away from the group meant death. It meant you were alone against predators, against starvation, against the elements. So we evolved this deep primal fear of being alone, this anxiety around disconnection that's wired into our DNA. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. Not everyone got that same wiring. Some people, and you might be one of them, they got a different blueprint. They got the blueprint of the lone wolf, the wanderer, the person who could leave the tribe and survive on their own. And in modern society, this manifests as something people often misunderstand completely. They call it being cold, being distant, being unable to connect. But that's not what it is at all. What it actually is a fundamental difference in how you process social bonds and emotional attachment. Now, I need to pause here for a moment because I want you to do something for me. I want you to think about the last time you walked away from someone. Maybe it was a friend who suddenly felt draining to be around. Maybe it was a family member whose presence started feeling suffocating. Maybe it was a romantic partner who you realized you didn't actually miss when they weren't there. And I want you to remember what happened after. Did you agonize over it for weeks? Did you lose sleep wondering if you made the right choice? Or did you just feel this strange sense of relief, this lightness, like you'd been carrying a weight you didn't even know was there until it was gone? If you felt that relief, if you felt that immediate sense of freedom, I want you to leave a comment right now saying, "I walked away and felt nothing." Just those 6 words. Because here's what's going to happen when you write that. You're going to see dozens, maybe hundreds of other people writing the same thing. And you're going to realize something crucial. This thing you've been carrying around, this shame about being able to disconnect so easily, this feeling that there's something wrong with you because you don't cling to people the way society says you should, it's not a flaw. It's not a defect. It's just a different way of being human. And when you see all those comments, when you see all those people admitting the same thing, something shifts inside you. That isolation you've been feeling, that sense that you're the only one who can walk away without bleeding, it starts to crack. Because you realize you're not alone in this. You're not broken. You're just wired differently. So go ahead, write it in the comments. I walked away and felt nothing. Let's build a space here where we can be honest about this without judgment. Now let's talk about what's actually happening inside your brain when you walk away from someone. Because this isn't just about being cold or emotionally unavailable. This is about fundamental differences in how human beings process attachment and social bonding. In psychology, there's this concept called attachment theory, and most people learn about it in the context of childhood and parenting. But what they don't teach you is that your attachment style shapes everything about how you form and break social bonds for the rest of your life. Most people fall into what's called anxious attachment or secure attachment. These are the people who feel genuine distress when relationships end, who agonize over social disconnection, who will bend themselves into pretzels to maintain connections even when those connections are actively harming them. But then there's this other group, and this is where you might see yourself. It's called avoidant attachment, but that label is misleading because it makes it sound like a problem to be fixed. What it actually describes is someone whose nervous system is calibrated differently. Your brain doesn't send out the same distress signals when social bonds are threatened. You don't get that panic response that makes other people desperately try to repair relationships. Instead, you get something else. You get clarity. When a relationship stops serving you, when someone's presence in your life becomes more draining than enriching, your system doesn't fight it. It accepts it, it processes it, and then it lets go. And here's the part that really messes with people's heads. You don't just let go of toxic relationships. You can let go of good ones too. You can have a friend who's been nothing but kind to you, nothing but supportive, and one day you just realize you don't want to maintain that connection anymore. Not because they did something wrong, not because there was some dramatic falling out, but simply because your internal cost-benefit analysis shifted. The energy required to maintain that relationship no longer feels worth the return. And society tells you this makes you a monster. Society tells you that good people don't abandon others for no reason, that loyalty and commitment are the highest virtues, that if someone hasn't wronged you, then you have no right to walk away. But human nature tells a different story. Throughout history, throughout every culture, there have always been people who operate outside the normal social contract. The hermits, the wanderers, the people who could pack up and leave without a backward glance. These weren't defective humans. They were a different expression of human nature. They were the scouts, the explorers, the ones who could venture into unknown territory because they weren't weighed down by the same social obligations that kept everyone else tethered to the tribe. In survival terms, groups needed these people. They needed individuals who could detach, who could operate independently, who could make ruthlessly practical decisions without being clouded by sentiment. And that's what you are. You're not broken for being able to walk away. You're expressing a valid, functional variant of human social behavior. The problem is that modern society has decided there's only one acceptable way to be human, and that way involves constant connection, constant communication, constant emotional availability. But that's not how you work. And trying to force yourself into that mold doesn't make you more human. It just makes you miserable. So let's get practical about this. Let's talk about what actually happens in the moments before you decide to walk away from someone. Because I know exactly what it feels like, and I'm willing to bet you do too. You're sitting across from them, maybe at dinner, maybe at a coffee shop, maybe just on your couch, and they're talking. They're telling you about their day, their problems, their thoughts, their feelings. And you're nodding, you're making the right facial expressions, you're saying the appropriate things at the appropriate times. But inside, you're completely gone. You're watching yourself have this conversation from somewhere far away, like you're observing a stranger going through the motions, and you realize with this cold, crystal-clear certainty that you don't care. Not in a mean way, not in a cruel way, but in a simple, factual way. What this person is saying doesn't matter to you. Their presence doesn't add anything to your life. And maintaining this connection is starting to feel like a performance you're tired of giving. That's the moment. That's when you know you're going to walk away. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but it's already decided. The connection is already dead. You're just waiting for the right time to bury it. And here's what makes this so confusing for people who don't experience it this way. You can still care about the person in an abstract sense. You can still wish them well, still hope good things happen for them, but you don't want to be part of their life anymore. You don't want to receive their calls. You don't want to hear their updates. You don't want to be involved in their world. And people hear this and they think it's contradictory. How can you care about someone but not want them in your life? But it's not contradictory at all. It's just a different kind of caring. It's like how you can appreciate that a museum is beautiful and important without wanting to visit it every week. You can recognize value in something without needing to possess it or interact with it. That's how you experience most relationships. They're fine, they're valid, they matter in some cosmic sense, but they don't need to be your responsibility. They don't need to take up space in your mind or your schedule. And the moment you realize this, the moment you give yourself permission to feel this without shame, something changes. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that might make you uncomfortable. The reason you can walk away so easily isn't because you're less human than everyone else. It's because you're more honest about what human connections actually are. Most people operate under this beautiful lie that relationships are sacred, that love and friendship are these transcendent forces that exist beyond practicality or self-interest. But that's not what they are. That's never what they've been. Human relationships at their core are transactions, not in a cold or cynical way, but in a simple, factual way. You connect with people because they provide something you need. Safety, companionship, validation, entertainment, resources, whatever it is. And they connect with you because you provide something they need. When that exchange is balanced, when both people are getting enough value to justify the energy they're putting in, the relationship continues. But when the balance shifts, when one person is giving more than they're receiving, the relationship becomes unsustainable. Most people, when they hit this point, they try to fix it. They communicate more, they try harder, they sacrifice more of themselves trying to restore the balance. But you just leave. Because you understand something fundamental about human nature that other people refuse to accept. Not every relationship is meant to last forever, and clinging to connections that have run their course doesn't make you noble. It just makes you exhausted. Think about it like this. Imagine you're at a party and you're having a great conversation with someone. The energy is flowing. You're both engaged, both interested, both getting something valuable from the exchange. Then gradually, the conversation starts to die. You've covered all the interesting topics. The energy is fading. And now you're both just standing there making awkward small talk because society says you can't just walk away mid-conversation. Most people, they'll stand there for another 10, 15, 20 minutes, slowly dying inside, maintaining this hollow performance because they've been taught that walking away is rude. But some people, they'll just smile, say it was nice talking to you, and move on to something else. That's you. Except instead of conversations at parties, you do this with entire relationships, and people call it cold. They call it commitment issues, they call it fear of intimacy. But it's none of those things, it's just efficiency, it's just honesty. It's just refusing to participate in the collective delusion that every connection deserves to be maintained, regardless of whether it's actually serving anyone. Here's something else that human nature teaches us, and this one really bothers people when they hear it. The ability to walk away easily isn't a weakness, it's a form of power. Real, tangible, social power. Because here's the thing about human dynamics. The person who cares less always has more power. Not because they're manipulative or cruel, but because they're not afraid of loss. Think about any negotiation, any conflict, any power struggle. The person who can walk away without flinching, who isn't desperate for the outcome, that's the person who controls the situation. Everyone else, they're operating from a position of need. They need the approval, they need the connection, they need the validation. So they'll compromise, they'll bend, they'll sacrifice their boundaries to maintain the relationship. But you don't have that vulnerability. You don't need people in that desperate, clingy way. So you can't be controlled by the threat of abandonment. You can't be manipulated by guilt or obligation. You can't be trapped in relationships that don't serve you. And this terrifies people. Because most people, whether they realize it or not, they use emotional connection as a form of control. They give you their time, their energy, their affection, and in return they expect your loyalty, your availability, your compliance. It's not conscious, it's not malicious, but it's how social bonds function. But when they try this with you, it doesn't work. You take what's offered, you appreciate it for what it is, and then when it stops being valuable, you leave. No guilt, no drama, no explanation needed. And people don't know how to process that. Let me tell you about something I call the ghost protocol, and you're going to recognize this immediately. You know how sometimes you're in a relationship, could be friendship, could be romantic, could be family, and you can feel it dying. You can feel the energy draining out of it. You can feel yourself caring less and less with each interaction. Most people, when they feel this, they initiate some kind of conversation. They say we need to talk. They try to address the problem. They attempt to salvage the connection. But you don't do that. You just start fading. You respond to messages a little slower each time. You become progressively less available. You stop initiating contact. And you do this so gradually, so smoothly, that by the time the other person realizes what's happening, you're already gone. That's the ghost protocol. And everyone acts like it's this terrible, cowardly thing to do. They write articles about how ghosting is the worst form of rejection, how it's emotionally cruel, how it leaves people with unanswered questions and unresolved feelings. But here's what they don't understand. The ghost protocol isn't about being cruel. It's about recognizing that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is disappear quietly, instead of forcing a confrontation that serves no purpose except to make you both uncomfortable. Because what would you say anyway? Sorry, I just don't care about you anymore. Sorry, maintaining this relationship feels like a chore. Sorry, I've run a cost-benefit analysis and you're not worth the investment. Those are all true, but saying them out loud doesn't help anyone. It just forces the other person to confront the brutal reality that you were always more capable of walking away than they were, so you fade instead. And yes, maybe they're confused for a while. Maybe they reach out a few times wondering what happened. But eventually they get the message. Eventually they move on, and you're free. Now I want to address something that people always bring up when we talk about this. They say, but what about empathy? What about compassion? How can you claim to be a good person if you can discard people so easily? And this is where we need to be really clear about what empathy actually is. Empathy is not the same as emotional attachment. Empathy is the ability to understand what someone else is feeling. Attachment is the compulsion to stay connected to them regardless of whether that connection is healthy or beneficial. You can have empathy without attachment. You can understand someone's pain. You can recognize their humanity. You can genuinely wish them well, and still choose not to be part of their life. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. Staying in relationships out of obligation isn't compassionate. It's not kind. It's actually incredibly dishonest. When you maintain a connection with someone that you don't genuinely value, you're lying to them. You're letting them believe they matter to you more than they do. You're letting them invest emotional energy into a bond that's already dead on your end. And then one day when you finally do walk away, or when your true feelings become impossible to hide, they're devastated. Not because you left, but because they realize you haven't been genuinely present for months or years. So which is actually crueler? Walking away cleanly when you realize the connection doesn't serve you, or staying and pretending until the facade becomes unsustainable? Let me tell you what human nature really shows us about connection and detachment. Every human being has a certain amount of social energy. Think of it like a battery. Every interaction drains that battery a little bit. Some interactions, the ones with people you genuinely connect with, they drain it slowly and they also recharge it at the same time. But other interactions, they just drain it. They take and take and take, and they give nothing back except obligation and guilt and exhaustion. Most people, they'll keep engaging in those draining interactions because they've been taught that good people sacrifice themselves for others, that loyalty means staying even when it hurts, that walking away makes you selfish. But here's what happens when you operate like that. Your battery runs down. You become resentful, bitter, exhausted. You start to hate the people you're trying so hard to care about. And eventually you break. You either lash out or you shut down completely. But people like you, people who can walk away easily, you're protecting your energy. You're being honest about your capacity. You're saying, I only have so much to give, and I'm going to give it to connections that actually matter to me, not to ones I maintain out of obligation. And this isn't selfish. It's not cruel. It's just honest. It's just accepting the reality of human limitations instead of pretending you can be everything to everyone. Here's your 7-day challenge, and this one's going to feel uncomfortable. For the next 7 days, I want you to pay attention to every relationship in your life, every single one. And I want you to ask yourself this question after each interaction. Did this energize me or drain me? Did I engage because I wanted to or because I felt obligated? If I never spoke to this person again, would I actually miss them? Or would I just miss the idea of them? Or would I feel relieved? Don't judge the answers, just notice them. Write them down if you need to. And at the end of 7 days, look at what you've learned about yourself. Look at how many of your relationships are genuine versus how many are just performances you're maintaining because you think you're supposed to. And then, and this is the important part, give yourself permission to start letting go of the ones that don't serve you. Not dramatically, not with big confrontations or announcements, just gently, quietly, honestly. Start redirecting your energy toward the connections that actually matter, or toward solitude if that's what feels right. Because here's the final truth that human nature teaches us. Some people are meant to walk alone, not because they're damaged or broken or incapable of connection, but because they're wired to value freedom over belonging, clarity over comfort, truth over performance. And if you're one of those people, the sooner you accept that and stop trying to force yourself into a mold that was never made for you, the sooner you'll find actual peace. If you made it this far, it means something in this video resonated with you on a deep level. And I want you to know that what you're feeling right now, that mix of relief and recognition, and maybe a little bit of fear, that's exactly what you should be feeling. Because we just dismantled one of the biggest lies society tells you. The lie that human connection is sacred and must be maintained at all costs. We just gave you permission to be honest about what you actually feel instead of what you think you should feel. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. But here's what I want you to understand. You don't have to apologize for being able to walk away. You don't have to fix yourself or force yourself to care more or cling harder. You're not broken. You're just one expression of human nature that operates outside the mainstream social script. And that's okay. More than okay, it's a strength once you learn how to use it properly. Here on this channel, every single week I break down these uncomfortable truths about human nature, about power dynamics, about social hierarchy, about all the things people feel but never say out loud. Give you frameworks for understanding yourself and others that actually match reality instead of the fairy tales we've been sold. So if this video helped you see yourself more clearly, if it gave you permission to stop forcing connections that don't serve you, then subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button, turn on notifications because every video is another piece of the puzzle, another tool for understanding the game we're all playing. And if this content resonated with you, if you felt like finally someone understands what it's like to walk away without bleeding, leave a like on this video so more people who need this message can find it. We'll see you in the next one. And remember, walking away isn't weakness, it's clarity.